Thank you very much, one and all, for being here in our sixth episode of Environmental Actions in India. आप सबका बहुत बहुत स्वागत है. In last five episodes, we covered five environmental actions in five different states. These states include UP, Uttarakhand, Maharashtra, West Bengal, and Jammu and Kashmir. For the first time in this series, we are having an environmental action from South India, particularly from Tamil Nadu. पहली बार हम दक्षिण भारत से एक environmental action के बारे में आज बातचीत करेंगे. In every episode, we try, and actually we do, we interact with the pioneers of environmental actions. We listen firsthand, we understand what they are doing, and this has been so far this has been what I'm doing. So today for environmental actions from Tamil Nadu, we picked tanks, their social, ecological, and economical significances. And we have our guest today who will speak on it, Dr. R. Srinivasan. He is also known as Tank Srinivasan. So you can understand his work and his passion related to tanks. तो हम आज टैंक श्रीनिवासन, जिनको बोला जाता है लेकिन उनका असली नाम है डॉक्टर आर श्रीनिवासन, उनसे बातचीत करेंगे टैंक के बारे में. तमिलनाडु में उसका सामाजिक, आर्थिक और पर्यावरणीय क्या महत्व है उसके बारे में जानकारी प्राप्त करेंगे. मैं श्रीनिवासन जी के बारे में थोड़ा और बात करूंगा, लेकिन उससे पहले हम एक छोटा सा वीडियो देखते हैं. जो वीडियो श्रीनिवासन जी ने बनाया है और उनके काम के ऊपर है. उनकी संस्था, एक प्रधान संस्था है, उनके साथ मिलकर इन्होंने बनाया है. इस वीडियो से, ये 15 मिनट का वीडियो है, इस वीडियो से हमको आइडिया आएगा कि हम आज क्या बातचीत करने वाले हैं.
What is dead and alive in India's past? When it comes to water technologies, tanks and ponds have sustained for centuries. It provides the most essential requirement, water for plants and animals. Found almost in every habitation, small and big, in varying shapes, they offer water. You are now looking at a topographic sheet of southern Tamil Nadu, prepared by the US Army. Just look at this. Blue shades are tanks, the black dots are habitations. Almost every habitation has got one tank. It is all man-made, and those who lived there created them. Nothing natural about them. Tanks have survived centuries. The builders are honored and remembered. Hundreds of villages are named after them. Undoubtedly, tanks are the most important rural infrastructure in southern India, where there are not many ever-flowing rivers. Rainfall here is seasonal, erratic, and undependable. It occurs in heavy downpours, and most of which happens in less than 40 days. Since water is needed throughout the year, it needs to be stored locally. Decentralized storages like these tanks help to capture water from the local catchments. They are called Kanmai and Kulam in South Tamil Nadu. Normally, tanks are formed by throwing a long bund on a sloping ground. Water is stored behind the bunds, that is on the upstream side and called water spread area. It is used for cultivating crops on the downstream side, that is below the bund and called IA cut. Sluices are water conducting mechanisms. Water flows to the fields by gravity. Depending on the size of the tank, there may be one or more sluices. Floodwaters are let out safely through the weirs. They are located at the end of the bunds. The floodwaters reach the low-lying tanks through the supply channels. In that way, a chain of tanks or tank cascades are formed. Though appeared to be crude and simple earthwork, they are sophisticated in their engineering design and need some appreciation of engineering behind it. Similarly, ponds are many types. Some are beautifully constructed and many are simple dugout ponds. They have inlets for water to enter, and some may have steps and bathing huts. Technical features of tanks and their structures vary greatly depending on their history, geography, sizes of irrigated area, and above all, their location. For example, a district like Shivaganga has a geographical area of 4,200 square kilometer but has around 5,000 tanks and ponds. Nearly 1/5 of its geography is irrigated by tanks. There is water body for every square kilometer. Without them, this landscape will be desolate and unlivable. The vast majority of tanks irrigate around 20 hectares or less, but there are exceptions like the Viranam tank that stores water to irrigate 19,000 hectares. All South Indian rivers are trained to feed the thousands of these tanks. Huge rivers like Vaigai ends up in tanks, hardly ever it reaches the sea. In 2020, Tamil Nadu has around 40,000 tanks and irrigates around 0.5 million hectares. There may be another 200,000 ponds connected to the tanks, benefiting all habitations. In many ways, these village tanks and ponds are part of the rural lives and livelihoods. They are the chief sources of water for agriculture and livestock in rural areas. In tank-fed lands, paddy is the major crop after the northeast monsoons. When the water is insufficient, farmers cultivate short-duration crops requiring less water. In the coastal districts of South Tamil Nadu, the groundwater is either saline or not available in plenty. Hence, the ponds become a preferred and important source of domestic and drinking water. Domestic and agricultural wells are normally located closer to tanks and ponds so that they get recharged from them. Millions of wells get recharged from the tanks and ponds. They are also sources of culture. Many South Indian villages have temples, churches, and masjids on the bunds of tanks and ponds. It is a custom that places of rituals and celebrations must have a pond or a tank. Apart from water, tanks do offer many uses. Cattle are usually taken out for grazing on the beds, bunds, and channels, and hence these land spaces are the main sources of grazing and livestock economy. The silt that arrives into the tank along with the water is excellent organic manure, which is applied in the fields to enrich the soil. Potters source their raw materials from clay deposits in the tank bed. Also, earth from the tanks is used for brick making, road laying, and construction. Collective and individual fishing is done in many tanks at the end of the water season, and villagers share the catch. Firewood for cooking is availed by the villagers from the tank beds. In many tanks, tree-lined bunds provide shade and create a cool microclimate for men and animals. All the inland bird sanctuaries are the tanks. It is an economy of service that is offered by the tanks. The present condition of many tanks is not desirable. A state like Tamil Nadu has lost over 500,000 hectares of tank-irrigated lands in the last 5 decades. Though frequent efforts are made by the government to address the problems of tanks, their condition seems to be distressing. Reasons for the decline of tanks and ponds are many. It varies from place to place. There are several problems noticed in them. Bunds are weak, encroachment and siltation, sedimentation of tank beds, choked or leaky sluices, damaged weirs, abundant growth of weeds in channels and tank beds, poor maintenance, dumping of garbage and discharging sewage. Fixing these problems deserves everyone's attention. Restoring tanks and ponds. Tank repairs are one of the oldest engineering programs that continue since the medieval times. Called many names such as tank restoration, tank rehabilitation, tank standardization, tank development, and tank modernization. They all aim to improve the conditions of the tanks and their components. Restoring tanks, though looks simple, is a complex process. The communities that depend on the tank have to be organized. Repair and reconstruction works have to be planned with their participation. Above all, it has to be carried out in a systematic manner. Professionals in Pradhan extend their technical and managerial skills to local communities to carry out such projects. The farmers are encouraged to contribute to the work through cash, kind, and labor. Depending on the context and funds, Pradhan Indigo Tank Project undertakes strengthening of tank bunds and repairs to tank structures, desilting of tank bed, promote tree planting and fishery, training the villagers in water-saving agricultural practices. Pradhan has implemented a 2-year project during 2020 to 22 in reviving 11 tanks and 10 ponds. The following are some of the visible benefits witnessed by the user villagers. Vadavirukkai. Vadavirukkai, a multi-caste, multi-religious hamlet, has 113 households. The village has an ancient tank and 2 small ponds, one for bathing and another for drinking water. The tank has a 1.8 kilometer long bund with a water spread area of 17 hectares. 42 families own 31 hectares of tank irrigated lands and 49 hectares of dry lands adjoining them. There are around 1,100 sheep and goats graze and depend on the tank. The supply chain for the tank is nearly 1 kilometer long and passes through neighboring villages. Cultivation of paddy is done in semi-dry conditions. This means the tank water is used for protective irrigation. If there is water left after first crop, the farmers may go for the second crop, usually cotton, chilies, gingerly and some pulses. But that rarely happened in the recent 3 decades. The village has got 2 combined water supply schemes operated by the government, but they are unreliable. A community well is located on the tank bund and operated by the village panchayat for domestic uses. The shallow well gives potable water whenever the tank gets filled. Otherwise, the water is saline and not potable. The drinking water pond is shallow and has no proper inlet to fill it, hence dysfunctional for the last few years. Drinking water shortage is a chronic problem. Villagers buy water from trucks that sell drinking water. In 2020, the villagers have approached Pradhan to help them rehabilitate the tanks and the pond. Pradhan team has organized the villagers. 2 associations were formed by uniting all castes. Bank accounts were opened in the name of the association to transact funds. Pradhan professionals have assessed the needs. The tank bund was very weak. The main sluice was leaking and about to collapse, and the supply channel encroached. Above all, there was no excavation done in the last 30 years. Also, the villagers wanted a deeper pit closer to the community well, so that their well will yield potable water. The supply channel encroachment was cleared, widened by 10 meters, and excavated for a depth of 60 centimeter for a length of 650 meters. Around 400 meter length of the bund is strengthened using the soil excavated in a deeper pit closer to the well. The sluice got repaired and cracks on the walls are closed and made operable. The work is carried out from August to October and completed before the rains. Traditional tree species in the village common places, including the bunds, were planted. In all, Pradhan has provided 2.6 lakhs for excavators, and the villagers have mobilized 1.46 lakhs to pay for tractors to take out the earth to form the bund. The work is completed in 4 months. The tank got filled soon after our work in October 2020. This happened ahead of many surrounding tanks. This is because of the channel excavation. Above all, even in the month of March 2022, water still remains in the tank and flows by gravity. The ponds were filled from the tank twice and availability for domestic use is ensured. In the last 30 years and more, the tank did not have water for such a long time in a year. The community well provided adequate potable water throughout the year. The farmers attribute this success to the excavation of the supply channel and excavation of a deep pit next to the well. And fingerlings are let into the tank and waiting to be harvested. Similarly, the inlet of the pond was reconstructed and excavation was done to strengthen the drinking water bund. The pond stores adequate water and will last through the year. In all, Pradhan has provided 2.54 lakhs rupees and people mobilized 1.54 lakhs to hire labor, tractors and construction materials. Incidental to water development, a lot of birds started visiting the tanks in its vicinity. Pradhan, with the support of Bombay Natural History Society (BNHS) experts, found 92 different species here. The project has created a lasting impact in other places too. The most important benefit the people realize in rehabilitated tanks and ponds is the extended availability of water.
என்னுடைய பேர் ஆரோக்கிய செல்வராஜ், வடவருக்கு அந்த கிராமம். இந்த கிராமத்து கண்மாய்க்கு கடந்த 2020 செப்டம்பர் மாதத்தில் பிரதான் தொண்டு நிறுவனத்திலிருந்து வேலை தொடங்கி முடிஞ்சிச்சு. இந்த கம்மாய்க்கு வந்து வரத்துக்கால், கம்மாயினுடைய வரத்துக்கால் ஒரு வேலை, குடிதண்ணீர் கிணறு பக்கத்தில் ஒரு குட்டை, இந்த மடை வந்து பராமரிப்பு பண்ணி அதை 3 வேலை நடந்துச்சு. மடையில் வந்து ஆளுக போய் உள்ள மண் எடுத்து விடுறதுக்கு பயந்துக்கிட்டு மது 2 பக்கம் மது இடிந்து விழுற அளவுக்கு இருந்துச்சு. இந்த 8 மாதத்துக்கு முந்தி இந்த மடையை சீர் பண்ணி கட்டி கொடுத்ததுனால இப்போ 8 மாதமாக தண்ணி வெளியே இப்போ எந்த பிரச்சனைலாம் வருது. மக்கள் போய் உள்ள மண்ணை எடுத்து விடுவதற்கு எந்த பயம் இல்லாமையும் உள்ளே போய் எடுக்கிற அளவுக்கு நல்ல வசதி வாய்ப்பு இருக்குது.
Pradhan believes that a focused effort is required to improve the conditions of tanks and ponds.
Thank you very much, Arun, for showing this. इस वीडियो 15 मिनट की वीडियो से हमको एक आइडिया आ गया होगा कि टैंक का तमिलनाडु में किस तरह का इम्पोर्टेंस है, सामाजिक, आर्थिक और एनवायरमेंटल क्या इम्पोर्टेंस है, क्या सिग्निफिकेंस है. और सेकंड पार्ट जो वीडियो का था उसमें आर श्रीनिवासन और उनकी टीम के द्वारा पिछले 2 साल में जो काम किया गया है उसका जिक्र है. लेकिन मैं ये बता दूं कि आर श्रीनिवासन सिर्फ पिछले 2 साल से काम नहीं कर रहे हैं इस पेपर, वो पिछले 30 सालों से टैंक के रिहैबिलिटेशन का काम कर रहे हैं. उन्होंने गवर्नमेंट के अलग अलग प्रोजेक्टों के साथ मिलकर के टैंक का रिहैबिलिटेशन का काम किया है और तमाम प्रकार की एनजीओ जिसमें प्रधान मुख्य संस्था है उनके साथ मिलकर के टैंक रेस्टोरेशन का काम 30 सालों से, 3 दशकों से ये कर रहे हैं. इसके अलावा उन्होंने बहुत लिखे हैं और उन्होंने टैंकों के रिहैबिलिटेशन के बारे में लिखा है. उसमें जो पुरानी पद्धति थी इरिगेशन की पुरानी पद्धतियों में किस तरह के बदलाव आने चाहिए उसके बारे में भी उन्होंने एक्सटेंसिवली लिखा हुआ है. डॉक्टर आर श्रीनिवासन जो हैं एग्रीकल्चरल इंजीनियर हैं जो तमिलनाडु से उन्होंने किया है. फिर उसके बाद वो इरमा से उन्होंने रूरल मैनेजमेंट किया एंड देन लंदन से उन्होंने पीएचडी की डिग्री की है वाटर लॉज में. उनका एक प्रोफेशनल लॉन्ग एक्सपीरियंस है वाटर टैंक तो रिहैबिलिटेशन करने में तमिलनाडु राज्य में. और इन्हीं कामों को देखते हुए उनको लोग आज भी उनको टैंक सी निवासन कहते हैं. तो आज हमारे लिए गर्व की बात है. वी आर ऑनर्ड टू वेलकम डॉक्टर आर श्रीनिवासन टू इंटरैक्ट विद अस टू एक्सप्लेन व्हाट द टैंक्स मीन्स टू पीपल ऑफ तमिलनाडु एंड हाउ आर यू कंट्रीब्यूटिंग इन रिहैबिलिटेशन ऑफ these tanks in Tamil Nadu. So thank you, Srinivasan ji, for being here with us. And over to you now.
Thank you, Jeet, for your kind words. with my speech. I'll
Right.
put up the presentation. So I am not very fluent with Hindi, though I can understand and talk a little, but I cannot give a speech in Hindi. So I will continue in English, and then maybe at the end I'll try to answer if you have got any queries and questions. So how many tanks and ponds are there in India? There are different estimates by different agencies. One of the recent estimate that is a bit, so there are many estimates about the number of tanks in the country. For the South and Bombay Presidency and Madras Presidency areas, the details are accurate, but in other parts, the numbers are not that accurate. So one of the data that we can rely on is the National Wetland Atlas of India that is published in 2011. They counted how many tank systems are there. Roughly around, according to their estimate, 200,000, roughly 2 lakh tanks are there, and five and a half, that is 0.55 million small water bodies that could be either tanks or bigger ponds. So in essence, 7.5 lakh systems are there, putting everything together. In Tamil Nadu, there are around 42,000 tanks. This number is varying between 39 to 42,000, but roughly we can say 40,000 tanks are there. Over the last 50 years, the system is declining. That I will share you in some detail. Just if you want to see how the topography, say the south central or the most part of Tamil Nadu's geography look like. In the film also we have shown, you just look at, this is a topographic map of this part. It covers 5 or 6 districts. So absolutely you will see every habitation will have a tank, big or small. So the tank generally means the name of the system. It could either be small or big. How big is it? An example is the Viranam tank. It irrigates 50,000 acres. That is the biggest tank, which is made in 10th or 11th century AD. That is roughly around 950 years or 1000 years before. So the process of tank formation and making everything is known, and it is going on for a long time in history. So for example, in Madurai region, the Nelson, the man who wrote the first precursor to India's district gazettes, that is written in Madurai, and he says there are no natural lakes or pools in any part of Madurai district. All that he says is that everything is created by men who lived there. Nothing is natural. So thousands of kilometers of okay, so in the Madurai region, it's roughly around 6 districts, present districts. There is no natural water body. Everything is created by man, from the Western Ghats, that is the hills, to the Indian Ocean, that's the Bay of Bengal. The whole area is made up of, in the geography, is covered with tanks, villages, and agricultural fields. So these are some of the few quotes. The man who has been touted or claimed as the father of Indian Council of Agricultural Research, John Walker, he says all the tanks that have been made, that can be made, all that he means is that there is no other place for anyone to create a new tank. So there are so much written about these tank systems. Historians, economists, sociologists, and many people have written. So the connecting tanks with the dams, that is the bigger reservoirs like Periyar and all, it has been carried out in the last century. Periyar project is one example that Periyar brings water to feed Madurai tanks. So the importance of tanks is not necessarily local, it is regional, and it covers so much of the geographical area. The biggest of the tanks are all made nearly 10 centuries before. After that, very few were made. In the last 2 centuries, it's very less. After the British, the number of tanks created during this last two centuries are very minimal, maybe less than 2000 or so. So all of these systems are historic, existing for so long. So an average tank is around 800 to 1000 years old. Move to next. So just some of the pictures that I'm trying to show you. These systems are the main sources for water. Not necessarily for irrigation. It is meant for domestic uses and groundwater recharge and all that you can imagine. Whatever be the use of water, it has been put to use through the tank systems. In the southern 6 districts alone, there are 9,000 tanks and 25,000 ponds. So next. See, the one reason people might be wondering, how come such a large number of systems have come into existence? It is basically the geography, rainfall, and the history. So first of all, the rainfall is very erratic and undependable. And the geography is undulating. It's unlike the Indus Valley or the Gangetic Valley. The region here is undulating. Okay, so basically the number of tanks or more in South Indian region is because of the terrain, rainfall, and the historic issues. Then next. Okay, you just look at these numbers in one district, which is around roughly 4,000 square kilometers. You see there are 2,300 habitations, and the number of tanks and ponds is around 5,600. So all that it means is that there are more than 2 water bodies per one habitation. So everywhere you will see. Let's go next. The rainfall, I said erratic. You just look at this screen. These are about the first part, the 12 bars is about the southwest monsoon, that is the dry crop season. The next one is the northeast monsoon, that is the returning monsoon that comes from the North India, that is for the paddy irrigation season. So both seasons are highly varying. It means if the rainfall is varying in a area where you need to store water, unless you have some storage, you cannot irrigate. In a dry rain-fed area, you lose your crop. That is what is happening now. It is more and more visible now. Only savior is if the tank systems are in place, they can survive. Let's go next. Okay, so the decline, I said, nearly 500,000 hectare of tank irrigated area from Tamil Nadu has gone out of service. In the last 50 years, we are talking about creating more and more irrigation, but the reality is 500,000 hectare of irrigation has gone away from the records. It means the systems are dysfunctional or in disrepair. This is in one district. You see this, the picture shows the decline. Next is everybody, in the last 25 or 30 years, groundwater irrigation is touted to be the big savior of Indian irrigation or water scenario. But again, if you look at, there are no sources to recharge them sustainably. So In hard rock geology, it means in hard rock areas, only when you store on the surface, you will get in your well. If you don't store on the surface, you don't get it in your well. So the groundwater recharge is mostly done by the tanks. Then comes the intervention. So where do we intervene and how do we do? So Pradhan has a program. It started in the early 90s, around 92, 93, and it's still going on in various shapes and forms. So the project focuses on the multiple uses of water. See, unlike command area projects where irrigation is the single use, this project does not have a single use. We have multiple uses. Irrigation is one of the use, domestic use, animal use, say drinking and grazing and all that included. And then is the organizing the community. So without organizing the communities and taking care of these things may not be changing for a better condition. So the Pradhan's project focuses on that. And there are innovative components. The times are changing, the uses are changing, and the project has certain components to create deeper storages below the sill level of the. All that it means is water will not flow by gravity. So some amount of water is retained. So the extended availability of water will be there for another 3-4 months through this method. So the Pradhan project has all these components. Some of these components we try to explain in the film. Okay. These are this is a typical village. This village is also we have shown in that film. The village has one irrigation tank and 2 ponds and 1 tank. So it is meant for different use. One was for drinking. Now they are not using it for drinking, but for domestic uses, washing utensils and other things. One is for bathing and for animal drinking. And the tank is used for irrigation, also for other uses. So the communities have different systems to survive, or in the sense to thrive. Next. So we are trying to attend to them to the maximum as much as it is possible. So this is again the example that we have shown in the film. Sivaganga is one of the smaller districts in the state with around 445 panchayats and 1,800 habitations. If you again look at like the one that I showed you, the Ramanathapuram, this will also have more than 2 water bodies per habitation. So our project, as I discussed, I shared you, we are trying to organize the villagers first and then undertake rehabilitation work, because this work does not, we cannot quantify how much money. Any amount of money can be invested, but then we limit what is needed essentially to make it functional. Okay. So in general, throughout the state, if you travel, the states of the tanks and ponds are very poor in condition, especially their bunds are weak, the water availability, the time, at least you should have 4 months to 5 months, because a paddy crop is 5 months long, so you should have that much time. Okay, so every tank and pond need protection from the decay and destruction. That is what we are trying to say. So it is not like whoever is asking you do, but the situation is highly demanding. So we are trying to show whoever is coming forward, we take up that. So the groundwater recharge, as I told you, the groundwater recharge depend on two parameters. One is the wetted perimeter, in the sense how much area or how much is the water line that is in a given pond or tank. That will serve the recharge. If you count it, it will be one of the largest length of wetted perimeter available through these tanks. So all that I mean is that the millions of wells have very huge dependency on these tanks for their recharge. Okay, let's go to next. Generally, 8 to 15% of the geographical area is underwater. So you imagine this much area underwater, one cannot create by all that, a lot of hype going around, catch water where it falls, catch water in your house or in your backyard. All that is fine, but that has limitations. It can only recharge a little, but only effective way, if at all, scientifically speaking, it is only through the tanks. So the law related to tanks, or in general, these are very old systems, and the law is also old. It's a legacy, from the British days it is given. But general performance of law is very weak, to say, in the sense it is not protected, it is not conserved, or it is not developed. So the law, in my view, it is failing, and it is continuously failing. And some of the court cases that I have cited here, these are all basically what is there in the law they are trying to pronounce. But occasionally some news makes kind of lot of noise is some of these judgments. One of the recent judgments, not so recent, maybe around 7-8 years old. It's a very damaging judgment that came from the Supreme Court. The court has said the case is about protecting these tanks as wetland systems. So there is a law in this country, Forest Act, to take care of several type of lands. One of them is under the wetland. The wetland rules, which the first time they brought in 2010, had a definition which accepted the scientific definition given by the Ramsar Convention. Then in 2007, they brought another revised version of those rules. There they used the Supreme Court judgment. That judgment has said the man-made water bodies does not deserve as much as attention like any natural water body. They used some other previous judgment that said all natural water bodies must be protected. That's a very innocuous kind of a word that has found. There is nothing natural about this in India, but the judges in their wisdom, they used it. But then the later judgment used the bigger bench has only said only natural wetlands deserve the protection, but not the wetlands. So in that way, this rule has eliminated nearly around 0.75 million tanks and ponds from its protection. So as it stands today, the wetland rules does not cover man-made wetlands, basically the tanks and ponds. So it is easy for the government to convert it into anything. That's the legal position now. So we suggest that must be looked at very seriously, and the rules must be revised. At least it must be brought to the 2010 version. So in sum, we are trying, in the sense, we are trying to say the civil society should be encouraged in one or the other way. People are ready, the NGOs are forthcoming, there are a lot of WhatsApp groups, lots of local action happening, but the facilitation or the support from the government is not that very much. I'm not meaning any particular government. Throughout the country, it is limited. After all, this is a state subject, so the state governments have to act here. So we suggest the government has a role to bring various instruments, various facilities, schemes, and all that to encourage civil society actors. Second, the philanthropy has to be brought in. It's a very funny situation. every tank has a name. Maybe the creator, in the sense that the donor in those days, it is not necessarily created by the kings and the rulers. It is all done by different kind of people. Even dance use, who was very famous in Pandya's court. She has also created a pond, or she has also created a tank. So that is named after her. Like that, if you look at hundreds of such systems have been created by the philanthropy over a long time. But now, these days, it is not that much. The Indian philanthropy does not focus very much. They don't see they have a role to intervene in this area, because even after say 1500 years, the oldest tank, they claim it is 1500 years old, so they are still surviving. So the sustainability of the philanthropic action, this is one of the highest. So we suggest, Pradhan emphasizes, philanthropic action should come forward to focus more and facilitate and help as many actors as possible, and to come into this. I think I will stop here, and then you can have.
Thank you very much, Srinivasan, for giving us time. It was wonderful discussion. We hope to do many more such episodes in coming days.